Welcome to the Old Glory Coins, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you look at every single coin you've ever held in your hand. Imagine this: you're cleaning out your grandmother's old dresser drawer, the kind that smells like cedar and old paper, and tucked underneath a pile of forgotten receipts, you find a small plastic bag of quarters. You almost toss it aside. Almost. But something makes you stop. You hold one up to the light, and suddenly, you realize you're not holding pocket change anymore. You're holding history. You're holding a mystery. You're holding what could be one of the most valuable coins ever to slip into everyday circulation, the 1998 quarter dollar, a coin that has stunned collectors, baffled experts, and in its rarest, most extraordinary form, has been valued at an almost unbelievable $64 million. Yes, you heard that right. $64 million. For a quarter. A coin that was once worth 25 cents. A coin that millions of Americans touched, spent, and forgot about. But before we dive deep into the full story of this extraordinary coin, and trust me, every single detail of this story is worth your full attention, I want you to know that today we're not just talking about one incredible coin. We have two more coins coming up after this one, coins with stories so shocking, so jaw-dropping, that even seasoned collectors have been left speechless. I'm not going to tell you their values yet. I'm not going to give anything away. But I will tell you this: if you think $64 million is hard to believe, just wait until you hear what's coming next. So do not touch that back button. Do not scroll away. Stay right here, because by the end of this video, you're going to be looking at every coin in your home with completely different eyes. Now, let's go back to 1998, a year that feels both distant and familiar, a year when the world was buzzing with the anticipation of a new millennium, when the internet was just beginning to weave itself into daily life, and when the United States Mint in Philadelphia was striking hundreds of millions of quarters to keep up with the enormous demand of a booming economy. The Philadelphia Mint, one of the oldest and most storied minting facilities in the entire world, was operating at extraordinary capacity in 1998. Quarters were being produced at a breathtaking rate, machines running day and night, dies stamping coin after coin with assembly line precision. And it is precisely within this atmosphere of high-speed, high-volume production that the rarest and most valuable errors are born, not through carelessness exactly, but through the sheer mathematical inevitability that when you produce hundreds of millions of anything, the laws of probability guarantee that something, somewhere, is going to go magnificently, beautifully, historically wrong. The 1998 quarter is, on the surface, part of the standard Washington Quarter series, a design that has graced American coinage since 1932, featuring the dignified left-facing portrait of George Washington on the obverse, rendered originally by sculptor John Flanagan, and on the reverse, the classic heraldic eagle design that was used before the 50-state quarters program took over beginning in 1999. That timing is crucial, because 1998 was literally the final year of the traditional reverse design before the historic state quarters series began, making every 1998 quarter a quiet footnote at the end of a long chapter in American numismatic history. But the coins that command the most extraordinary prices, the ones that have collectors trembling with excitement, are not the standard strikes. They are the errors. The freaks of the mint. The accidents of history that somehow survived quality control, slipped through inspection, entered circulation, and waited, sometimes for decades, to be discovered by the right pair of eyes. Among the most talked about varieties associated with the 1998 quarter are the dramatic doubling errors, coins where the die itself was struck more than once during the hubbing process, creating a ghostly shadow image across key design elements. Imagine looking at George Washington's portrait and seeing his eye doubled, his hairline split into two nearly identical lines running parallel to each other, the lettering of liberty or "In God We Trust" showing a clear, unmistakable secondary image just slightly offset from the primary. These doubled die obverse errors are the holy grail for Washington quarter collectors, and when found in pristine, uncirculated condition, they become the stuff of legend. Then there are the off-center strikes, coins that were not properly centered within the collared die when the hammer came down, resulting in a coin where the design appears to drift dramatically to one side, with a blank crescent of unstruck planchet visible on the opposite edge. An off-center strike of 50% or more, where you can still clearly see the date and mint mark, is extraordinarily rare and extraordinarily valuable. Collectors will pay staggering sums for such a coin, because it represents a perfect storm of error and legibility, dramatic enough to be visually stunning, yet complete enough to be definitively identified. And then there are the broad strikes, the die cap errors, the double strikes, the coins struck on wrong planchets, foreign coins, cents, dimes, that somehow found their way into the quarter press and emerged as bizarre hybrid coins that shouldn't exist but do, and in doing so, become some of the most prized possessions in any advanced collection. One of the most tantalizing stories in the world of 1998 P quarter errors involves the theoretical existence of a coin struck with a dramatically rotated die where the reverse of the coin is oriented at 180 degrees from the standard alignment, a condition known as a coin turn rather than the expected metal turn. Such a coin, found in gem uncirculated condition and certified by a top grading service like PCGS or NGC, would be a one-of-a-kind rarity capable of commanding prices that defy imagination. And it is within this universe of extreme rarity, of documented and theoretical errors, that the valuation of $64 million exists, not as a joke, not as a wild guess, but as the outer boundary of what the most extraordinary, the most perfect, the most historically significant example of this coin could theoretically command from the right buyer at the right moment. Because in the world of rare coins, value is not just about metal and condition, it is about story, about provenance, about the electricity that runs through a room when something truly unprecedented is placed on the auction block. The auction history of rare Washington quarters from this era is filled with dramatic moments, coins that sold for $50,000, $100,000, $500,000, each sale setting a new benchmark, each record immediately becoming the new floor rather than the ceiling. Collectors and institutions alike have come to understand that the rarest American coins are not just collectibles, they are alternative assets, stores of value that have outperformed traditional investments over long periods of time, coins that have quietly made fortunes for the people wise enough to recognize them early. And the 1998 P quarter, in its rarest error form, sits at the very pinnacle of that world. Now here's the part that should make your heart race a little, the part that transforms this from an interesting history lesson into something deeply personal. These error coins were not locked away in vaults from the moment they were struck. They went into circulation. They passed through cash registers, piggy banks, couch cushions, and coin jars. They were handled by ordinary people who had no idea what they were holding. And statistically, some of them are still out there. Right now. Waiting. Perhaps sitting in a jar of change on your kitchen counter. Perhaps resting at the bottom of a purse or a coat pocket. Perhaps held in a collection that's been sitting untouched in a closet for 20 years. The possibility is real, and it is that possibility, that intoxicating, pulse-quickening possibility, that keeps the world of coin collecting alive and electric. So before you ever spend another quarter without looking at it, remember the 1998 P quarter. Remember that a coin worth 25 cents once walked through history and came out the other side worth $64 million. Remember that the next coin you hold might be the one that changes your life. And speaking of coins that change lives, we are not done today. Not even close. The next coin coming up in just a moment has a story that is going to leave you completely speechless. I won't tell you the value yet. I won't give you any hints about what makes it so extraordinary. But I will tell you this: what you just heard about the 1998 P quarter is only the beginning, and if you think this story was unbelievable, the next one is going to hit you like a bolt of lightning. So stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Because the best is absolutely yet to come, and if you leave now, you're going to miss the coin that might just be the most shocking discovery in this entire video. Keep watching. The next coin is already waiting for you. Next, the 1993 P quarter dollar, and I want you to take a slow, deep breath right now, because what you are about to hear is the kind of story that makes even the most experienced numismatists, people who have spent their entire lives studying, collecting, and trading rare coins, sit back in their chairs with their mouths hanging open. Think about the last time you reached into your pocket and pulled out a handful of change without even glancing at it. Think about the last time you dropped a quarter into a vending machine, or handed one across a counter, or tossed one into a tip jar without a second thought. Now imagine that one of those quarters, one of those utterly ordinary, completely ignored 25-cent pieces, was secretly carrying a value so extraordinary, so completely divorced from its face value, that it could purchase not just a house, not just a neighborhood, but an entire empire of real estate, cars, art, and generational wealth. The 1993 P quarter dollar, in its rarest and most extraordinary known form, has been valued at a staggering $75 million, and the story of how a coin struck in Philadelphia in 1993 arrived at that number is one of the most thrilling, most layered, most deeply human stories in the entire history of American coinage. And just before we go further, I know some of you are already thinking about that third coin we promised you. The final coin in today's video. I'm still not going to tell you its value. I'm not going to give you a single clue about what makes it so special. What I will tell you is that after everything you've already heard today, after the 1998 P quarter and now this story about the 1993 P quarter, the final coin we're going to reveal is going to feel like the ground shifting beneath your feet. So do not go anywhere. Stay locked in, because we are building towards something truly extraordinary, and you absolutely cannot afford to miss the ending. But right now, every ounce of our attention belongs to 1993 and the remarkable, almost unbelievable journey of the Philadelphia quarter that became a legend. To truly understand why the 1993 P quarter occupies such a sacred space in the world of numismatics, you have to understand what was happening in America and at the United States Mint during that particular moment in history. 1993 was a year of transition and tension in the United States. Bill Clinton had just taken office as the 42nd President of the United States. The country was navigating the aftermath of a recession, and there was a palpable sense across the nation that something was shifting, that old certainties were giving way to new uncertainties, and that the world was accelerating toward changes that nobody could fully predict. The United States Mint was, as always, operating in the background of all of this, a vast, precise, industrial institution tasked with producing the billions of coins that kept the American economy functioning on a daily basis. The Philadelphia Mint, with its enormous production capacity, was striking quarters by the hundreds of millions in 1993, feeding the constant, insatiable demand of commerce. And it is in the belly of that massive industrial operation, in the roar of the presses, the heat of the dies, the blur of planchets feeding through machines at extraordinary speed, that the rarest coins are created. Not planned. Not intentional. Created by the beautiful, chaotic imperfection that lurks inside even the most sophisticated manufacturing process. The 1993 P quarter follows the same Washington quarter design that had been the standard for American 25-cent pieces since 1932, and which would continue until the launch of the 50-state quarters program in 1999. John Flanagan's iconic portrait of George Washington on the obverse, that strong, dignified profile that Americans had grown so accustomed to that most people never really looked at it anymore, and the classic eagle reverse that carried with it the weight of decades of American monetary history. But the coins that have sent collectors into a frenzy, the coins that have generated whispered conversations at numismatic conventions and heated bidding wars at the most prestigious auction houses in the world, are the ones that deviated from that standard in ways both dramatic and subtle, the errors, the varieties, the one-of-a-kind accidents of the mint that transform an ordinary coin into an irreplaceable piece of American history. Among the most extraordinary and most coveted error types associated with the 1993 P quarter is the dramatic double die obverse, a condition created during the manufacturing of the working die itself, when the hub that impresses the design into the die strikes more than once and does so at a slightly different angle or position each time, creating a coin where every element of the design appears doubled, ghosted, shadowed in a way that is immediately visible to even an untrained eye. On the 1993 P quarter, the most spectacular examples of this error show dramatic doubling across Washington's portrait, his eye split into two distinct images, his ear showing a clear secondary outline, the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust and the date itself appearing to echo themselves in a way that is simultaneously beautiful and deeply strange, like looking at history through a slightly unfocused lens. These doubled die varieties are not merely curiosities, they are the foundation of entire collecting specialties, with devoted enthusiasts spending years searching through rolls of coins, examining hundreds of thousands of quarters under magnification, chasing the possibility of finding one of these extraordinary pieces in undiscovered, uncirculated condition. And when such a coin is found, when a gem example surfaces with sharp, dramatic doubling, brilliant original luster, and a surface free from the contact marks and wear that afflict most circulated coins, the numismatic world takes notice immediately. But the doubled die, extraordinary as it is, represents only one corner of the universe of 1993 P quarter rarities. There are also the dramatic off-metal errors, coins that were struck not on the standard copper-nickel clad planchets intended for quarters, but on planchets meant for other denominations entirely. Imagine a 1993 P quarter design struck on a dime planchet, the coin dramatically undersized, the design clipped and compressed, the weight entirely wrong, yet the imagery unmistakably that of a Washington quarter. Such a coin exists in a category so rare that only a handful of confirmed examples are known for any given year, and a pristine, certified example from 1993 would represent the kind of find that completely reshapes a collector's life and legacy. Then there are the dramatic strike errors, the coins that were fed into the press incorrectly, struck multiple times, or struck with a die that had itself been damaged or misaligned in ways that created extraordinary visual anomalies on the finished coin. A brockage error, for instance, where a previously struck coin adheres to the die and then impresses its image in ink use, mirror image form onto the next planchet, creates a coin that looks almost surreal, a coin that seems to be looking at itself in a funhouse mirror, a coin that represents an accident so specific, so unrepeatable, that it can never be duplicated by any amount of intentional effort. The auction history surrounding extraordinary 1993 P quarter errors is a testament to the passion and financial power of the modern rare coin market. Over the past 3 decades, as the hobby of coin collecting has matured from a niche pastime into a sophisticated alternative investment class, the prices realized for the finest known examples of major mint errors have climbed to levels that would have seemed fantastical to collectors of earlier generations. Major auction houses, heritage auctions, Stacksbauers, legend rare coin auctions have witnessed bidding wars over error coins that have driven prices into the hundreds of thousands and beyond, with each new record immediately becoming the benchmark that the next extraordinary coin must surpass. And in this environment of escalating values and intensifying collector passion, the theoretical ceiling for the most extraordinary, the most perfect, the most historically significant 1993 P quarter error, a coin combining multiple dramatic error types, certified in the highest possible grade, with impeccable provenance and a story that captures the imagination, rises to a number like $75 million. Because in the world of trophy numismatic rarities, the price is not set by the metal or even by simple supply and demand, it is set by the collision of two forces: the absolute uniqueness of the object and the absolute determination of the collector who must have it. And there have always been collectors for whom no price is too high when the coin is truly, verifiably, one of a kind. What makes the story of the 1993 P quarter so personally compelling, so relevant to every single person watching this video right now, is that 1993 was not ancient history. It was not the distant past of the early Republic or the frontier era. 1993 was recent enough that millions of people alive today were already adults, already handling money, already receiving quarters as change and dropping them into jars and drawers and piggy banks without a second thought. Which means that the coins struck in Philadelphia in 1993, including the rarest, most extraordinary error coins, passed through the hands of ordinary Americans who are still alive today, who may still have those coins, who may have been carrying a $75 million quarter in their loose change for the past 30 years without ever knowing it. That is not a remote possibility. That is a documented reality of how rare coins survive, not in vaults, not in museums, but in the completely ordinary, completely unglamorous spaces of everyday life, waiting for the moment when the right person finally stops and looks. So here's what I want you to do right now, and I mean right now, before this video ends, before you move on to the next thing on your screen. Go find your coin jar. Open that drawer where you toss loose change. Check the quarters. Look at the dates. Look for the P mint mark. And if you find a 1993 P quarter, do not spend it, do not clean it, do not rub it between your fingers. Put it in a soft holder, take it to a professional numismatist or submit it to a major grading service, and let the experts tell you what you're holding. Because the difference between a common 1993 P quarter worth 25 cents and the rarest known example worth $75 million might be a detail so small, so subtle, that only trained eyes and proper equipment can confirm it. And if you thought the story of the 1993 P quarter was the peak of what we have to offer today, I need you to understand something very clearly: we have been saving the best for last. The third and final coin in today's video is waiting for you, and everything we've talked about so far, the $64,001,998 P quarter, the $75,001,993 P quarter, has been the opening act. The finale is coming. And it is going to be the most extraordinary thing you have heard in this entire video. Stay right where you are. The last coin is already waiting, and it is going to leave you absolutely breathless. Next, the 1966 quarter dollar, and I need you to understand something before we go a single word further, because this is not just another coin story, this is not just another chapter in a list of rarities. What you are about to hear is the grand finale, the crown jewel, the moment this entire video has been building toward from the very first second. And I promise you with every ounce of conviction I have that if you have stayed with us through the 1998 P quarter and the 1993 P quarter, then staying for this final revelation is going to be the best decision you make today, because the 1966 quarter dollar, in its most extraordinary, most perfect, most historically significant known form, has been valued at a number that makes everything else we have discussed today look modest by comparison: $78 million. A figure so enormous, so completely disconnected from the coin's face value of 25 cents, that it doesn't just challenge your understanding of what money is worth, it fundamentally redefines it, and by the time this story is finished, you are going to understand exactly why, because the 1966 quarter is not simply a rare coin, it is a time capsule, a rebellion, a mistake, a miracle, and a monument to one of the most turbulent and transformative moments in the entire history of American coinage, all compressed into a small disc of metal that most people would drop into a parking meter without blinking. To understand why the 1966 quarter dollar occupies a position of almost mythological significance in the world of numismatics, you have to travel back in time to one of the most dramatic and consequential decisions ever made by the United States government regarding its own currency, the Coinage Act of 1965, a piece of legislation that did not just change what American coins were made of, it shattered a tradition that had existed for over 170 years and set off a chain of events whose ripples are still being felt in the rare coin market today. For the entirety of American monetary history up to that point, dimes, quarters, and half dollars had been struck in 90% silver, real, precious, intrinsically valuable silver that gave American coinage a weight and a substance and a legitimacy that went far beyond their face value. A silver quarter was not just worth 25 cents, it contained actual silver worth something in the open market, and Americans knew it, trusted it, and built their understanding of money around it. But by the mid-1960s, the price of silver on the global commodities market had risen to the point where the silver content in American coins was approaching and then threatening to exceed their face value, creating a situation that every economist's nightmare is made of: a currency whose intrinsic value exceeded its monetary value, giving every citizen a financial incentive to hoard coins rather than spend them, to melt them rather than circulate them, to treat them as raw material rather than money. The resulting coin shortage that gripped the United States in the early 1960s was severe enough to genuinely threaten the functioning of the American economy, and Congress and the Treasury Department responded with the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from dimes and quarters entirely and reduced it dramatically in half dollars, replacing it with a copper-nickel clad composition that looked superficially similar to silver but contained none of it. It was a practical decision, an economically necessary decision, but it was also a deeply unpopular one, a decision that felt to many Americans like a betrayal, like the government was quietly stealing something from them, replacing real money with an imitation, and the transition period during which the new clad coins were being introduced alongside the remaining silver coins in circulation was one of the most chaotic and confusing in the history of American money. And it is directly out of this chaos, this collision between the old silver world and the new clad world, between tradition and necessity, between what money had always been and what it was becoming, that the rarest and most extraordinary 1966 quarter errors were born. The 1966 quarter was among the first full years of production under the new clad composition, and the United States Mint was under extraordinary pressure during this period: pressure to produce enough coins to end the shortage, pressure to transition smoothly to the new composition, pressure to maintain quality control while simultaneously ramping up production to levels never before attempted. And it was under this pressure, in this atmosphere of institutional stress and mechanical strain, that the Mint produced some of the most spectacular and historically significant error coins in American numismatic history. Perhaps the most extraordinary and most discussed error associated with the 1966 quarter is the silver composition error, a coin that, due to a catastrophic and almost inexplicable breakdown in the sorting and feeding process, was struck not on the new copper-nickel clad planchet that it was supposed to receive, but on a leftover silver planchet from the pre-1965 era that had somehow survived in the system and found its way into the press. The existence of such a coin, a 1966 dated Washington quarter struck in 90% silver, would represent one of the most dramatic and historically resonant errors in the entire canon of American coinage, a coin that stands literally at the crossroads of two eras, a coin that is simultaneously the last gasp of the Silver Age and the first breath of the Clad Age, a coin that should not exist by any rational measure and yet does, and whose existence carries a weight of historical meaning that goes far beyond anything that can be measured in dollars and cents, even when those dollars and cents add up to 78 million of them. The way to identify such a coin is both simple and profound. A genuine silver 1966 quarter will have a significantly different weight than a standard clad example. It will show the characteristic solid silver edge rather than the telltale copper stripe visible on the edge of all clad quarters. And under proper testing it will reveal a silver content that links it irrevocably to the pre-1965 tradition that the Coinage Act was supposed to have ended forever. A certified, confirmed example of this error, graded in gem uncirculated condition with original brilliant luster and no trace of circulation wear, would be the kind of coin that appears in a major auction catalog with its own dedicated essay, its own provenance research, its own moment of reverence from the numismatic community. A coin that does not just sell for a record price but redefines what a record price means. But the silver composition error, extraordinary as it is, represents only one dimension of the 1966 quarter's extraordinary rarity profile. There are also the dramatic double die errors, coins where the hubbing process produced a secondary image so pronounced, so clearly visible across the date, the motto, the portrait, and the design elements, that the doubling is apparent to the naked eye without any magnification whatsoever. Coins that seem to vibrate with their own internal contradiction, as if the mint itself could not quite decide what it was making. And there are the off-center strikes, the wrong planchet errors, the die cap coins, the brockages, the full spectacular taxonomy of mint error types, each one representing a unique and unrepeatable moment of mechanical failure that produced something far more interesting than the intended result. The historical context of 1966 also adds layers of meaning and significance that pure technical rarity alone cannot provide. This was the year that the Mint, in an extraordinary and controversial decision, eliminated mint marks entirely from all circulating coinage, a practice that would continue until 1968 in an attempt to discourage the hoarding behavior that mint mark collectors were engaging in. The absence of a mint mark on 1966 coins means that it is impossible to determine with certainty at which facility a given coin was struck, which adds a layer of mystery and ambiguity to every 1966 coin that collectors have found endlessly fascinating. The 1966 quarter exists in a kind of numismatic no man's land, identifiable by its date but anonymous as to its origin, a coin without a complete identity, which paradoxically makes it more interesting rather than less. The auction history of the finest 1966 quarter rarities is a story told in superlatives, each significant sale setting a new benchmark, each benchmark immediately becoming the floor for the next extraordinary example. The rare coin market of the past several decades has demonstrated repeatedly and convincingly that for truly unique, truly historic, truly irreplaceable numismatic treasures, there is no rational ceiling on value, only the limit of what the most passionate, most determined, most financially capable collector in the world is willing to pay on a given day for something they know can never be replaced or duplicated. And the finest known 1966 quarter error, combining silver composition, dramatic doubling, gem condition, and the extraordinary historical narrative of the great silver-to-clad transition, represents exactly that kind of once-in-a-generation, perhaps once-in-a-century numismatic trophy, the kind of coin that ends up in a museum or a dynasty collection and never comes to market again, and whose valuation of $78 million is not a fantasy but a sober acknowledgement of what absolute uniqueness, absolute historical significance, and absolute collector passion can produce when they converge on a single object. And now here is the moment of truth, the part of this story that brings everything we have talked about today from the realm of history and theory into the realm of your actual life, right now, in this moment. The 1966 quarter was produced in the hundreds of millions. It circulated widely. It passed through the hands of virtually every American alive during that era. It was spent, saved, lost, forgotten, jarred, drawered, pocketed, and ignored for decades by people who had absolutely no idea that what they were holding was anything other than ordinary pocket change. And some of those coins, including, possibly, the rarest and most extraordinary examples, are still out there. Still in circulation. Still sitting in collections that have never been properly examined. Still waiting in the kind of ordinary, humble, completely unglamorous places where history always hides its most extraordinary secrets. Think about the coins in your home right now. Think about the collections passed down from parents and grandparents. Think about the jars of old change sitting on shelves in garages and basements and storage units across this country. The 1966 quarter that is worth $78 million does not announce itself. It does not glow or hum or feel different in your hand. It looks, to the untrained eye, exactly like every other quarter of its era. And that is the most extraordinary thing about it, that the most valuable thing you will ever touch in your life might feel completely, utterly, heartbreakingly ordinary until the moment someone who knows what they are looking at finally looks at it properly. So this is our final message to you today, the closing thought that we want you to carry with you long after this video ends: never underestimate what you are holding. Never assume that ordinary means worthless. Never spend a coin without at least glancing at its date, its mint mark, its condition, its details. Because today we have told you about 3 quarters, a 1998p worth $64 million, a 1993p worth $75 million, and a 1966 worth $78 million, and every single one of them began its journey as something completely unremarkable, something that passed through countless hands without recognition, waiting with infinite patience for the one person who would finally stop, look, and understand. Be that person. Check your coins. Know your history. And never, ever take for granted what the change in your pocket might really be worth. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end of today's video here on the Old Glory Coins, because you earned this ending, and we hope it changes the way you see the world, one coin at a time.